Okay, so today we're going to talk about criminal profiling and Robert Ressler. So what is criminal profiling? It basically uses techniques to narrow down suspects in an investigation by using certain behavioral traits or characteristics in personality. It originally had no scientific basis whatsoever and was only based on intuition, but in more recent years it's been proven to be more scientific and more useful than it had been in the past. So the first rumored case of criminal profiling was in Jack the Ripper, and it was actually done by George Phillips and Thomas Bond in 1888. Basically, they profiled Jack the Ripper by saying, like, he was good with a knife, had some medical background, or was like a butcher. I'm sure you guys have probably heard that at some point. But James Brussel actually used profiling in 1956 to catch the mad bomber George Metesky in New York. So we'll get into that really quick. So the Metesky case, this was orchestrated a series of bombings throughout New York City in the 40s and 50s. I think he planted around 33 bombs over the course of 16 years. This began criminal profiling as we know it today, and James Brussel famously predicted all of these characteristics and were proven right. Some of them were wrong, but those ones aren't included here. So he was born outside of the United States and of European descent. He was between 40 and 50 years old. He was a bachelor living with female relatives, cleanly shaven, well-dressed, athletic build, a textboy paranoid. And this one he kind of got wrong, because when they went to arrest him, he was wearing normal clothes, you know. But then he asked before they left if he could change, and he came out wearing a double-breasted suit. So James Brussel is actually not a criminologist. He's a psychiatrist, and he mainly used common sense. He included some other psychological ideas, but mainly just used common sense. This led to the boom of criminal profiling. So Robert Ressler, the guy that we're talking about, right? He was not a psychologist, he was actually a criminologist. He directed the Federal Behavioral Sciences International, which is a section of the FBI, and he was actually the one who pushed for the term criminal profiling, and he began to create crime scene analysis. So the formation of the Behavioral Sciences Unit was formed in 1974 to investigate serial rapes and homicides. During this time, you're thinking Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper, in later years, Dahmer, and John Wayne Gacy. So Douglas and Ressler interviewed 36 people in the course of 3 years. This included 36 serial killers, including Ed Kemper, in order to form categories and theories surrounding certain circumstances of the murder. So Ed Kemper, this is the one that we're going to be mainly talking about. He first killed his grandparents at 15. He shot his mom in his kitchen, and then shot his grandfather in the driveway so that he wouldn't have to find her. And when someone asked him why he did it, he said, "Because I wanted to know what it felt like." And then he later killed 6 female students at a local university and had sex with their corpses. And then he ended the killing spree by killing his mother, decapitating her, using her head as a dartboard, and then called his mom's friend and had her come over and then killed her as well. He hid the bodies in the closet of his mother's house. So Ed Kemper, he was interviewed by Robert Ressler. Later, Robert Ressler and Tom Chapman created a book detailing all of these interviews, and it included Ed's. They gathered information about the killers, which would eventually help in the profiling process and allow to differentiate different types of killings to show how the killer may be psychologically. And how did Kemper help Ressler? He participated in several interviews, and he even threatened Ressler's life at one point. He also threatened to screw off the head of an FBI agent that was not letting Ressler leave the room. He helped develop a general profile of serial killers and serial rapists. His IQ was near genius level. It was around like between 120 and 146, I believe is what it was. And he gave a lot of insight on that. It's rumored that he actually helped profile Ted Bundy, but there's really no proof of that. So the FBI introduced 4 phases of crime, which is the antecedent, if I pronounced that correctly. It was the plan or fantasy before the murder. And then what triggered the murderer to act in some cases and not others. So the method was there a pattern? and how did they commit the crime. So if you're looking at Ted Bundy, for example, he would target young women by using like himself as a incapacitated individual, so he'd have like a broken arm or something like that, and basically play on their emotions there. So body disposal, was there multiple crime scenes, or did the disposal only take place in one area? And then the post-offensive behavior, that's like, did they contact the media, or are they contacting investigators? Just kind of gathering that kind of information really helps in profiling individuals. So where is criminal profiling now? Criminal profiling is still used today. There's more of a scientific basis in how it's used. It identifies a person's mental, emotional, and personality characteristics based on what was left at the crime scene. So for example, if we're taking Ted Bundy's case or Ed Kemper's case, Ed Kemper was really one of the main people that we can look at profiling, because he helped us figure this out, right? So we're looking at Ed, and we're saying, okay, he killed his mom and put her body in the closets, but he also killed all of these young women and left them in the woods or wherever, hitchhikers. And he killed a lot of people, so we're looking at different crime scenes and kind of that stuff. So, yeah, criminal profiling is really interesting, but these are my references. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
So I think the first thing that kind of popped in a lot of our minds would probably be like the show Criminal Minds. So in your personal opinion, how do you think these scientists viewed like that show and the light that it shines on criminal profiling?
So criminal profiling is really mainstreamed. It's not actually, in the shows, it's not actually like how they would do it in real life. Because these people are using like, they're always catching the criminal, right, on these shows. That's not the case in real life. Usually the only time they're using criminal profiling is because they can't catch somebody, right? So they're like trying to create a profile based off of what they think the person might look like or act like, or you know, that kind of thing. But that's kind of usually a last resort, if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered your question.
What do you think like the scientists think about the profiling? Like those meetings?
It's more scientific now because they use like psychological facts around the case, but I think the scientists that use it really enjoy it, because obviously they wouldn't do it if they didn't like it or believe in it, but I think a lot of people don't believe in the science behind it. Yes?
So, you know, true crime is like a big thing now, right? Everybody wants to talk about serial killers. When all of this was coming about in the 70s, was that the case with sort of society and the cultural zeitgeist that we were really interested in that kind of stuff? Or was this more like something kind of happening over here and the general public really didn't know that the FBI was developing these techniques?
I think the general public knew about it. I think we're always going to have those crime nuts that are, you know, head over heels for all of whatever the FBI is doing at any given point. But mainly it was just the FBI doing this thing, and then when they published the book, Whoever Fights Monsters, and they're really publicizing and pushing this criminal profiling thing, I think that's when it kind of started to take off in the public's eyes. Yes?
What do you think it will take for criminal profiling to become more reliable?
That's a good question. I think it would have to, I don't know if it's ever really going to become a super reliable science. I think it's just something that we're gonna develop as the years go. It's never gonna be 100%. It's just like anything else. But I think it would have to have more of like a psychological basis and like push for these more research done about certain disorders and like how people function with them and everything. So find symptoms.